up before I come and make a big mistake in front of everybody. Anyway, you've probably seen me do demonstration for a baby rattle, and it does the same thing. It's a series of 3 captive rings. And this one, let's see, this one here, I was gonna try and do something real cute. And, with 3 rings, you make the middle one a little bit bigger than the other 2, and it's a little more cute. But I used to do them, whoop. I used to do them with 4 rings. I used to not throw them around so much. But if you make the ring big enough, the hole in the ring big enough, and the stem of the goblet small enough, you can snap one, right? And then thread it into the other one and glue it back together. If you try and saw it, you'll wind up with a discontinuity in the grain, and everybody will know exactly what the hell you did. But if you snap it and then super glue it back together or whatever, I used to do that with 4 rings on baby rattles, and you show them and he's like, how did you do that? Did you like, turn this and then pull it off and put those rings on it? No, they're looking at them, and then you hand them one with the 2 interlocking rings. It's like, no, that's magic. So anyway, I figured none of you really needed to see how to get from square to round and how to chuck stuff up. These are both cherry blanks. And I'm going to do a kind of I don't know, according to Tom over here, he wanted to see free rings. And so I'm going to kind of go through the chalice part kind of quick, if you don't mind, or if you're really interested, raise a hand here or whatever and tell me what you want. We're going to take this off of here so I don't bang my elbow on it. And please do interrupt me, okay? Interrupt me with any kind of questions you got. I'd be pleased to talk to you. So what we're going to do here first off is just bore a hole down in here ways. And years and years and years ago, before there were twist drills, there was something called a spoon bit. And the people that do Windsor chairs still use them because you can kind of direct, you can change the angle of the hole as you're drilling the hole. And it looks a hell of a lot just like that. And so that's what we're going to do here, is we're going to start out and make a little depression right in the middle of this. We're going to rub a bevel, bring it up. And here we're going to go. And push straight in. And so now I'm sure you're all familiar with that last little bitty nib right there in the center of everything. And if you just do this first, then the rest of this kind of hollowing out takes place, and you don't have to mess with it on every strike in. And I'm going to make a kind of a shallow goblet out of this. It'll go a lot quicker that way. And if you can see what's happening here, I'm actually, the chips are coming off of the side flute here. And that's because it's more or less parallel with the grain that runs this way through the piece. If you try and just dig into the end grain, there is that initial cut where you're entering, and you see every time I come back here and I rub a bevel, come back here, maybe roll the tool a little bit to pick up a chip, and then chase it in there. And once you get a depth of cut kind of thing, a chip of a certain depth, then you can bring that side of the flute in there and slice it off pretty easily. So this will be a final pass. You're going to pay attention to it. Be really careful. And I'm going to come in from underneath here. Get this last little bit out of there. Maybe do a final scrape on the inside surface there with the left-hand flute. And check my work. That's acceptable for a demonstration. Oh, gosh, I don't even know. It says here about 1,200. That, who asked that? All right. So you turn the inside or the outside first. Really, I don't think it matters a whole lot. The game is that you have to get them parallel with each other. You get the similar wall thickness there. So this is essentially spindle turning. And so when you work the spindle, you always turn from large diameter to small diameter. This part here is pretty much a cylinder. And so we can turn either direction on that. Rob, is there a pair of calipers? Outside calipers? You got a lot of damn nerve running them out there truck knowing I was going to need them now. I'm just kind of going by feel here. Back on my first time on Earth, I wanted to do a career in ceramics, and so some similar kinds of skills are involved here. So this is the same technique that you use whenever you're turning a spindle. You're essentially turning a spindle here. And so you start out with the tip kind of angled toward the direction you're going. And then as you round the corner, you do this OG turn is what this amounts to. And as you get toward the bottom of the cut, you roll the tool to more of a 6/12 entrance. That'll get your ear balls, huh? I pull a hand around here, right? And just kind of quell a vibration. Quits talking to you so much. does get a little warm. Hello. We'll check the depth here, and I'm just gonna eyeball this. You just kind of rubberneck your head around, close one eye. That's how deep it is. And then transfer that directly to here. Oh, you're too good to me, man. Thank you. Okay, so there's a mark that is the bottom of the chalice, bottom of the bowl part of it. So somewhere shy of that, around here maybe, is where we want to have it turn in, not go past that. Otherwise, there are parts that really shouldn't be there. So one of the techniques, and I do a, what is it we have out there at the farm? A turning day, right? At the farm, 13th of May, be there, or be rectangular, or sorry. So you can check the thickness here. Take it out, take a look at it. That's about 1/8 of an inch. And you read it as you go down. You set your caliper a little bit wider, okay? A wider than the actual thickness of the bowl or the wall. And then instead of paying attention to this, you pay attention to the gap on the outside. Can you all see that? You understand what I'm saying? Pay attention to the gap. You don't really pay attention to what the caliper says. And so you watch it, and you can see here how it starts to gravitate toward the inside there. So maybe, have you got a pencil? Oi, somebody got a pencil, eh? I got a pen. That'll work. Got it. Beat you to it, Rob. Thanks anyway, though. So there, that's about where it starts getting thicker. And so from that place, can you make that out in the video? Here's where it starts. See how it kind of dives in? So that's where we'll start the taper going inward. Again, rub a bevel, raise the handle, roll the flute a little bit. And check the thickness again. I think I still got, yeah, considerable to remove down there. Just a design element that I like to put on here. There's a part of a flower called a calyx. That's that kind of, when it's in bud stage, that's that part that's over the top of the actual petals. And I like to use that kind of motif on these. So there's a calyx. And so those kind of details, as well as fillets that you use on a regular turning. Fillets, if you really want to do nice, crisp work, you kind of undercut those. Instead of making them square, you kind of make that undercut there, and it really emphasizes that detail pretty well. At this point, we kind of want to establish how big the base is going to be. I kind of like to make the base a little bit smaller than the part of the goblet, this bowl, I guess. And so now that we've done that, we can kind of concentrate on the pasty resistance here. So this will be one of my rings. I use a parting tool to start that process. I don't want to get it too thin because all the stability here is just off of cantilevered off of here. So I probably use a parting tool differently than certainly what it's designed to do. One of the things I do with it is I lay it over on the side. And if you do this technique, you have certainly all kinds of different cutting points on here, okay? You have the one that everybody knows about that does the actual cutting when you're going in to make a parting tool cut with a caliper. The other thing that it has are four other scraping surfaces. Can be used flat like that, or it can be used up here like this. And you also have 2 points that are just exactly like the points on a skew. And so you can also use it exactly like you'd use a skew in this situation. So, I do a little production turning every now and then. And picking up and setting down tools takes a lot of time. So if you get multiple uses out of a tool, why, that saves considerable time. So when you do this, probably I'm running over plowed ground here already, farmer reference here. When you're doing this, you don't look at what's going on here. You look over here. This is where you're going to tell what the cut you're making does, what the effect of the cut you're making is. And so while I'm working here, I'm looking over there. And when I see that get to look like a pretty good radius, and it helps to be a little bit ambidextrous. So at this point, you can undercut them and do considerable amount. And several of you have asked today already, can you do this without the captive ring tool that I made? And you can, if you have a big enough ring and you cut in like this. You just continue this cut from both sides and eventually they'll meet. And then the cross section of the ring itself winds up being kind of teardrop shaped. You see what I'm saying? That follow through? So what you're really striving for here is a ring that if you were to snap it in half and look at the snap face, you're looking for it to be round, right? If you use the technique that only has a parting tool, they meet together here in the middle, right? And so what you wind up with is this tight point and then a radius on the outside. It kind of looks like a teardrop, right? So at this point, you want to sand the outside of that ring. Because this is the last chance you'll get to do it other than by hand. And if you want to put any decoration on it, like I usually like, again, this is a detail. You use the parting tool here, and you use a negative angle on it, and you engage the ring. And then I like to guard it on either side with a little bit smaller incision. This is the way you start if you got a wire tool and you want to burn that, make it black. Now's the time to do that. I did not bring that today. Kind of get the burrs out of those little incisions. Is it my hand getting in the way there? I have to keep that in mind. Anyway, at this point, oh, where's the camera here? Here. So this is a tool that I made, gosh, several years ago. This is the second one, actually the third one. The first one I made, I thought, well, you got to make a one that turns this way, and then you got to make another one that turns the other way. Don't make that mistake. You have to make them both point out or point in, depending upon, never mind. So, yeah, if you use, like the first one I ever made was, I just got a piece of it was actually a, what do they call it? A star drill. You know how you use a star drill to pound a hole in a piece of concrete or stone? And they're generally made out of 1095 carbon steel. It's good steel. And it's nice because you can heat it up red hot and then you can bend it rather than just grinding away material out of something here that's this rectangular cross section. Does that follow through? You can go ahead and you just forge out a slim taper with a little bit of round on it, right? Or you can grind it out either way and heat it up good and red and then bend it. And it's nice to have a little bit of this back turn on it. Can you see it? It's not 100%. It doesn't just come out and make a J, right? It comes out and kind of sweeps this way and then comes back around. Yeah? Anyway, so you have to be very careful coming out of this. And you want to cut a little bit more. You don't want to engage the entire profile of this, right? If you do, it'll chatter and rip the thing out of your hands and so forth. So don't do that. It's really inconvenient. And the other side. You're doing your best here to make sure that these two come together and break loose. So you can see me kind of moving back and forth a little bit as I go into this, right? As you kind of pivot in and you move it back and forth at the same time. And that way the hole that you're making, the cut that you're making is wider than the actual tool. Otherwise, it'll chatter really bad. And like I say, it'll do inconvenient things. So once they're loose, it's a matter of coming up with a choice for a stem design. When you do these stems that are really thin, you always want to work from underneath of the base backwards this way. Do not, get that thing whittled down all the way over here and then decide, oh, I wish I would have done that, and then go back there. So if you have a really long spindle, some of the seen these things done out of greenwood, and greenwood, in fact, you have to do this with anyway. Be sure that you bring, like what I did was I would bring a piece of wadded up paper towel or something or other, and I'd stuff it inside of here and then bring a ball bearing center up against it, and that'll kind of stabilize this in. You can also reach around and grab it like this and cradle, but you have to be able to turn with one hand. And you don't want to grip it very tight or else you're just twisting off. Again, it's kind of inconvenient. Again, this is just good practice for a cove cut. Just exactly like you do if you were doing a spindle. And this cut is a little bit undercut. And again, it's all about leaving a shadow line there that's a little more evident. I'm going to try and get that little ring out of there. I'm going to get myself in trouble here. Or I might be able to get away with it. It's chattering pretty good. A lot of people tell you that you should sand at a really high RPM. And in my opinion, that's a really good way to wear out sandpaper really quick. So, because you all know how to sand your turnings, I'm going to quit. Unless you have questions about sanding. Nobody got questions about sanding? I'll move this in a little bit. I've got this little 1/4-inch gouge. That's beautiful for doing this kind of thing, but you can't hang it out off the tool rest very far. So you can see I'm kind of holding the the ring. With one hand. I'm using the thumb to kind of drive the tool. So you enter a cove cut there with the gouge at about 6 and 12. You engage the tip. This is a lot like turning finials if you've ever done that. I like these little beads with a fillet on either side of it. And here you can see also, instead of going in straight like this and creating a right angle flat on the fillet, I'm going to angle this thing slightly like this. And so the fillet is a little bit undercut. And here is the start of that bead that I make. And we're going to use the tip of the parting tool, kind of like a scraper. Or I'm going to do it. What's this wee stuff, Hinosabi, huh? We'd like those two fillets to be about the same size. I have to relieve this just a little bit. And I want to pay attention to the bead now. So again, I'm looking over here, not looking at the tool here. Hello. I'm going to reduce the size of a cut there, so I don't have to use the entire width of the 1/8-inch parting tool here. We'll put that same detail right here on the bead. And then reduce the size of the fillet by carefully cutting in. Does this all make sense? You see what we're doing there? You have to kind of stabilize this a little bit. And this cut, I just kind of pivot on my finger back here and take off a little bit material at a time. And because we've undercut this, I want to kind of undercut this a little bit. And I've diminished that a little too much. That's better. I always find it useful and practical when you're doing this. I've made a couple of these, made sets of them for a couple at a wedding. And I find it really good when they're empty, and especially when they've got wine in them or whatever, to give the base a little more weight. And yeah, go ahead. Ask me again. Bevels on gouges. 3 different ones. This one I've been using, it's a 1/2-inch gouge. It's got kind of a fingernail grind on it, so it's more of a spindle tool than all of them do, in fact, have that fingernail grind. This one here is about 40 years old. You can tell by the length of the flute or lack thereof. And so again, I don't even know. I sharpen all my tools freehand, and so I can't tell you angles. You know, I look at them. It looks like this one here, 1/4-inch gouge, has a little bit steeper of an angle, maybe a 35-degree angle, whereas these may be more like 40, 45 kind of thing. Does that answer your question? Yes, based on how much, like I use this one to remove hogging off lots of material. This one, not so much. And it's all about how much torque the cut actually exerts against the piece of wood. I can take off tiny little minute pieces of work here with this gouge, and it doesn't make much torque, which would twist the stem off for me. Does that answer your question? Okay. You can see I've got a little bit of tear out here, and that's okay because we're still going to remove more material there. I'm going to use this little bitty gouge, and again, we're going to do a little bit of a back cut, and we're just kind of smoothing out. We've got the profile. I've got the profile I want. I just need to kind of refine the surface of it a little bit. Now here, I can't very well use this tool anymore, except over in this area, right? Because if I hang it over that far, then this thing just starts chattering on me really badly. That's why this one works really well, because it's actually full dimension here, not much of a flute on it. Again, these are just cuts to kind of refine the surface of the tool, more or less scraping. Here's that, you were asking me about how to get that little cove at the bottom of your ash bowl. And here it is, in fact. Where you run the tool way over there to like where it's sitting at 6 and 12. The flutes. Does that make sense? Is that a term that everybody can relate to? When you sand, there are a lot of turnings that are won or lost at this point. You can see this real crisp detail on both the incisions here on the bead, as well as how crisp they are. This detail right here at the bottom of the bowl, and then on either side here. If you just kind of gob some sandpaper on here, you will lose that entirely, and that's really what makes the turning entirely. And here, if you cram this up tight, you'll lose this undercut to the bottom side of that calyx area there. And so very carefully sand that separately. And then you can do that little cove just by bending the sandpaper. So this is all just about design choices here, aesthetic choices. You know, a nice little OG curve here. Maybe another little cove, or not a cove, but a fillet, undercut fillet like that. The shape of these things is also important. Here I'm going to make this one kind of asymmetrical. So instead of making it a radius, it's kind of part of an oval. And then it's always best to undercut the base of it, right? So that way it sits on a ring around the base rather than sitting on a, you know, trying to get the whole surface flat. You always wind up with a dome under there. And 9 times out of 10, there's an irritating little tip on it there that makes the thing sit kind of unstably. So undercutting, I may not be able to get there. I'm awful close to the chuck here. Yeah. An interesting thing about spindles, and it holds true here also, anytime you, almost anytime you see a spindle in vertical display, they'll all be asymmetrical. They'll be weighted at the bottom usually. But spindles that are horizontal will almost always be symmetrical about a center axis. Think about chair rungs, and they're all the same on both sides. But most stair spindles and most classic pieces of work that you'll see will all be asymmetrical if they sit vertical. So this is a demonstration piece. So I'm not all that concerned about getting everything exactly right. The finish sanding on it ain't great, but you're more interested, I hope, in seeing me demonstrate goblets and rings than you are in see me sand. So this is a bowl gouge, 3/8 inch bowl gouge. And I can't get in there with that either. And there is. So again, there is enough room here, right? It's completely off there, wasn't it? There is enough room here, like I spoke of earlier, where you can take this and snap it and then thread it inside the other one, and then they're interlocked. And you just put a dot of super glue on there, and it's like, whoa, how did you do that? So every one of these, like I was telling some other folks earlier, that in the process of making this, if in fact, like there's this burr that develops right here on the inside where the two cuts from left and right meet, okay? Where those two meet, there's always a little burr around the inside of that. Now, I've done a lot of baby rattles, and what I do is I get a whole pile of them together and I just sit down in front of the television with a pocket knife and clean them up. And really, nobody, certainly the baby, never looks at them, okay? And so that's what I'll do here. But it is possible that when you cut them loose, you turn a short cylinder out of what will become the stem, and then you wrap a piece of sandpaper around it, and be careful which way you wrap it, clockwise or counterclockwise. And you get a rubber band, and you hold it on there with a rubber band. And then while the lathe turns with the sandpaper kind of loosely attached, you can take each one of these then and sand the inside of it, right? By taking it like this. Can you see that? Here we go. How about you sand it on the inside in this fashion, and you can kind of angle it and roll it this way and that way and get that burr off the inside. So what I do with them mostly is I take my sweaty pocket here and get my pocket knife out and carefully sit here with a pocket knife and cut them loose. How much time have we got, Tom? Woohoo! Thank you, Tom. So I'll leave one of them with the burr and pass this around if you like.
Making, you have certain woods that cause you more trouble than others when you make
Yes,
goblets?
most definitely. If you were to try that, woods that are tight grained, maple, and this happens to be cherry, ash will work. if you have it really close rings on it. But if you wind up getting a wood that's really coarse and you wind up with an annual ring that runs right through the middle of the stem, and it happens to be what they call a ring forest wood, that makes a pretty delicate stem on there. So maple, I'm sure Osage orange would work really well, just because you could probably make that spindle half that diameter. Maple and cherry work really well. I did a big chalice for a priest one time out of Coca-Cola, and certainly that worked beautifully, but it was an expensive blank.
This is cherry.
It certainly is, yes. Do you have a question? Yes, sir. Respectable.
To cut on the side of the parting tool. I've done that for years and somehow thought it wasn't kosher.
Yeah. Well,
But you can cut rings like that whenever you're in some position where you want to cut a bead
yeah.
or something like
Yeah.
that.
It's a scraper essentially when you use it that way.
That's right.
And the thing is that you can also make a V groove with it, but when you make a V groove with it, you must lay it over on one of the flats, right? This is not the regular rectangular profile or rectangular cross.
Yeah, I use a rectangular. Sometimes I use
Yeah, so
flat
this
one.
is the diamond cross section parting tool, and you lay it over on one side, and it pulls the upper piece completely out of play as far as a cut. You only work on this side, and so as you go in there trying to make a V notch, and you can't go in very deep, or it will start chattering pretty severely. But you go in and lay it on one side, and it kind of wanders over that way, and then you carefully lay it on the other side, and it'll wander back the other direction.
Well, you're the first person I ever saw use it other than myself. And I thought somehow this isn't kosher.
Well, you can't, it's not designed to do that. It's very thin cross section. And if you hang it over very far, I'm sure you can snap it off. So it's kind of a delicate little operation there.
Now, aren't you concerned with the rings floating around on there once you, sorry. Isn't there concern for the rings that are floating around on there once you've separated them free to come into contact and get in your way? Or do you normally leave it that way, or do you like tape them off to one side? Like
That's certainly,
how I would
if
do
it bothers you, certainly that's a good way to go about it. Just tape them off to one side. I don't know how many of those baby rattles I've made over the last,
You've been doing this for
yeah,
40, 50 years now.
whatever it is. I started when I was in like junior high. But anyway, yeah, I've taught myself to be able to just kind of move them out of the way with one hand and turn with the other. But certainly,
I guess I'm close.
I doubt it, but tape them off would be a really good idea, or rubber band them, or somehow, and be able to work on the rest of the spindle there. Anybody else?
Oh,
What kind of finish are you putting on there so babies can gnaw on them and
I'm
people can
sorry?
drink out of there? Finish.
The finish on them?
Yeah.
The ones that get used, I generally finish with an epoxy finish. And the lead-based paint, he says. The game there is that they're never used for very long. At a wedding ceremony, somebody uses them. And there may be some liability there, or something that's in an epoxy that would be leached out by the alcohol in the wine or the champagne, in fact. And so the fact that maybe you use them one time in the entire life of it is a game there. And if you were to use, like the chalice that I made, I don't know which is worth, leaving no finish on it and having extractives out of the rosewood, that would certainly be there. Rosewood is a dye wood. They used to chip it up and make dyes with it for fabric. So you can, make a case for that one way or the other. But the fact that it's not there very long leads me to believe that it's pretty safe. And the fact is, and there's a lot, you see this on discussions too about food safe finishes, right? The fact of the matter is they're all food safe. The part that's toxic is the volatiles, okay? The fact, that's the plain simple truth, is they are all safe. It's like if you were to, I don't know, cut up a milk jug, right? And eat pieces of the milk jug, they'd come out just like they went in, right? And the same thing is true of the materials that are in finishes. Your body doesn't manufacture the solvent that can access that. But the solvents, those will get you. So Make sure they're good and cured out.
All right, let's give Paul a hand. I really appreciate it. Nice job, Paul.
Thank you.
How many points on a parting tool?
2 points.
How many cutting surfaces? Thanks again, Paul. It was great.
Yep.